and then they got heat stressed. And so if you have that happen and you've got leaves that look like they are tattered or they're even partly brown now, you probably should give it some TLC.
Give it some what?
TLC, some tender loving care.
TLC.
Where do you buy that?
No, that's not. Cutting it down is always an option. I'm not a tree doctor, Kevorkian. So anyway, in oak wilt. Oak wilt, you have a lot of oaks here too. And oak wilt is a disease that I'm seeing, and as the crow flies, it's in your backyard, basically.
Oh, yeah.
It is right around the corner. And I saw on Mountain Road, right off of Brighton, I'm driving home from a job, and it looks like fall. And so I look, and I see there are some huge trees, and it looks like they've been recently trimmed. And I don't often just stop and talk to homeowners when I see things, but oak wilt is a public nuisance, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And if you can stop the spread locally, you can save a lot of people a lot of money. So I stopped to talk to her, and she said, well, yeah, we just had the trees trimmed in late May. And that's a no-no. And the reason why is because when you wound a tree, when the insects are flying and they smell that pruning cut, you know, just like I was getting those bark beetles on me, they can smell it. And what they do is they have spores on their bodies and they can transfer it that way. I think the biggest problem are unscrupulous tree companies, because they really should not be trimming oaks.
And the other thing is they're climbing them with spikes. If you're gonna have a tree that you're gonna keep, and these guys are gonna climb the trees with spikes, it's an oak, he's talking about all the injuries. You just opened about 40 injuries on the way up the tree and down as they jam those spikes into the tree and they leak sap all over.
Yeah, and they don't tell you that. And if you don't believe us that they know that they shouldn't be using spikes, look on the side of the tree they spike.
When's the best
Always
time-
the side opposite the major view of the tree.
When's the best time to prune trees? I mean, is it in the winter, is it late?
Well, it
fall?
depends on the tree and it depends on what you're going for. But things like oaks, do not dismember until November. Okay? Until the trees are basically dormant. If the trees are dormant, chances are the insects are not flying.
And for maples, you're gonna wait until the sap is up in the tree, which is usually mid to late May. You prune them early in the year and they're gonna leak all over the place.
What about the pines and spruces, the evergreen trees?
Again, you know, there are other diseases too. So I mean, the optimal time to prune in terms of disease management is going to be in dormancy. Now, if you need to crown raise or something, you know, people are still more important than trees. Although I know you can argue with me on this, but if you're gonna, you know, if you've got a situation where it's a safety issue for a person, or you know, you're gonna mow the lawn and poke your eye out, by all means, you know, take care of it. But as a general rule of thumb, dormancy is the best.
And I guess too, if you're looking at evergreens, if you feel you have to do a lot of pruning on evergreens, there's a problem. First of all, a lot of them really don't need to be pruned except very, very lightly. But if you planted it a foot from your driveway and it's covering the driveway, it wasn't the tree's fault. But you think about how big it's going to get, you know, as it grows, you need to place them correctly. So if a lot of pruning has to be done, and the other thing is you want to be very careful about deciding that you want to cut the leader off the tree. Evergreens are not going to do well if you cut the leader off. You can shorten them, but you're shortening them with an IQ that they're still going to be able to grow.
But if you have like, I think I have that white pine needle on some Norway. Isn't that what you do, is cut the leader off?
Well, we're talking about live leaders, we're not talking about dead ones.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Dead is going to go when it's dead.
Okay.
And then you have to create another leader for the
Right.
tree so it can grow upwards. But we're talking about live leaders, you're just not going to cut them off if it's dead. But then again, that's the doorbell ringing saying, next year, early April, you better have the top of that tree sprayed to protect them, because the mommies will be back every year looking to dump eggs on somebody, and you have no idea where they're going to go. It's Russian roulette. So And if they kill the leader on the tree that you've got and you create another leader, they can kill that one too. So the tree may be getting wider, but it's not getting any taller. And you don't want that. After a while, it damages the tree.
Fortunately, white pine weevil doesn't attack the super tall trees. Sometimes you'll get one, 30, 40 feet. But typically, it's around 20 feet down to, 6 feet. And I think it's because that's generally the level that the females fly.
Well, they're not exactly aerodynamic.
Yeah.
They sort of...
Like
they sort
bobos of insects.
Yeah, bozo, yeah, look at this with the sand in the bottom.
Yeah.
So they don't fly well. It's like if you're looking at European pine sawflies. Usually it's somewhere that you can see them damaging needles. It's not going to be, 50 feet off the ground kind of a deal, or at ground level. So same thing, there's certain ones you can do easier.
I'm going to start flying through a little faster here. Okay, new insects and diseases. Now this is Singapore River and the port, and you see all these ships here. And one of these ships is like this, and you can see that they can carry up to like over 10,000 of these packing containers. And they ship this stuff from this port all over the world, and they cannot inspect them all. They
No
inspect
people
one or
left.
two.
No people left.
So, all that needs to really happen is a hitchhiker from one of these places. And because we have a global economy now, we're demilitarizing, we're always going in places and coming out and pulling back. We're going to see a lot more new stuff. So this is just an interesting thing. It's a very interesting time to be in our industry because there are a lot of things that are coming.
And they're saying that every 2 weeks a new species comes into San Francisco Bay. Doesn't make any difference what the species is, whether it's insect, disease, it could be something waterborne. So you realize there's a lot of stuff coming our way as the world gets smaller.
Yeah. This is something that's happening in the Northwest. We've got pine mountain beetle. I showed you the black turpentine beetle. It's a cousin. And this is an interesting insect because what it's doing is it's coming in and it's attacking large, mature trees similar to the life stage of yours. And what's happening is they're coming in after a period of drought or a period of environmental stress. They're coming to the tree. Not only are they damaging the tree, but they introduce a fungi into the tree. And when they do that, not only does the tree have to fight off the insect, but it also has to fight off the fungi. And a lot of times it ends up, now if you wound a tree, they don't heal like you and I do. What they do is they close off the area to the rest of the tree. So they're constantly compartmentalizing these little areas of damage. And what can happen is it can actually close off enough area around the tree that it has no longer has a viable transpiration stream, which is the water conduction from the roots up to the needles, and it basically kills itself. So what happens if you have a widespread, and a lot of this is happening because we have park systems where we have large acreages of trees with a no burn type of a management system, which is not natural. If you look back to 1988 and you look back to the Yellowstone fires soon after, we had drought, we had fire suppression, what happened over time with fire suppression is that you get litter, you get trees that fall over, and there's no ground fires to clean everything up. And so you get all this fuel, and then you get a lightning strike and you have a massive fire. So I just want to quickly say that you guys are in a unique situation. You have a lot of pines and things like that. This is not an area of like California, but if you have a fire situation, your neighbor has a fire, do you have a natural fire break? You have to kind of consider, do you have a lot of natural fuel? I mean, you kind of want to make sure that if you have a fire, that it's not going to come through your woods, because, I mean, there is a lot of natural wooded area here between the houses. And, I talked about that pine plantation in my own family, and, for years, they haven't done anything, and it's a mess. And we had a fire across the street, and if that fire would have jumped across the street, it would have devastated that entire plantation. and the firemen were there, and all of us were there with our garden hose. That wouldn't have done much. I had my sprayer filled with 400 gallons of water, ready to just help. The fire department was able to contain it. So it's very scary, especially with the temperatures and the drought. Okay, so
We should check our insurance coverage then, right?
yeah, absolutely.
It's always smart.
Okay, this is an insect that we don't have to worry about yet, but it's a 5-hour drive away. This is Asian longhorn beetle, and it originally showed up in New York and in Chicago, major ports. And the way that it was found was there are people that take care of trees in New York City. They kind of adopt the trees, and they go out and they water them, and they put sweaters around them. I don't know what they do. They take care of them. And one of the residents who was taking care of a maple tree called the forestry department and said, there are holes all over this trunk, and I could stick a number 2 pencil right into it. It's that big. Well, they got some attention because we really don't have native insects that do that. And so they identified that there's this huge infestation, or it's actually not huge, but what they did was they identified the epicenter, where the concentration of the insects were, and then they treated an area around it, both in Chicago and in New York. And it was deemed a success. You didn't see any new infestations popping up. And then all of a sudden, earlier this year, it was found in between Dayton and Cincinnati. And so it is dangerously close here. And I'm not sure what they're doing to suppress it down there, if they're doing the same type of program where they're cutting down the trees, or they're treating within a certain radius around the epicenter. That's, so I'm not sure what they're doing. So if you have a cottage somewhere up north and you've got, logs or something, please do not transport firewood.
Yeah, or EAB either.
For, EAB, for emerald ash borer, for things like this, and this is how it's going to spread, most likely.
And for the Asian longhorn beetle, your main danger is going to be to maples. And that's the thing that's replaced a lot of the other things that fell by the wayside, all the elms, and now we've got all the ashes that are going. So we really don't want to turn into a biodesert. So again, don't transport wood, buy it wherever you're at, so you're not bringing anything. Because that's how emerald ash borer got to Lenawee County. All those crazy people going to MIS, to the Speedway, took all their firewood and then dumped it when they were done with it because they didn't want to take it home. It all waddled out of there and got into all the neighbors.
Yeah,
Thank you, people.
it's a mess. It's horrible. So
Why are the southern states not susceptible?
because they have a different type of tree species. Now, if you look at, the maples are kind of like their favorite, but they also will attack beech, birch, aspen, elm,
Oh, yeah.
and if there's any ash left over.
Everybody wants ash now.
But this is a remarkable insect in that it's big. And we have a cousin called, it's a lookalike called white pine sawyer.
Mhm.
And you may see them on your screens and things at night, or sometimes they're attracted to light. I saw one on my second floor bathroom screen, and I'm just crazy enough to go out and get the ladder, put it up and run up there and catch it, and it's in my freezer.
Yeah. But these guys are unique because the Chinese call them the starry sky beetle, because on their back they have random scattered white spots on the black background. And when you see them in person, their legs are kind of, have a bluish cast to them. They're very interesting.
Yeah.
But if you have the pine sawyer that he's talking about, they have one spot that's right between where the wing covers come together, kind of right behind their head.
Yeah.
So they're unique for that.
But they're called the longhorn borer or longhorn beetle because their antenna is at least the length of their body.
They're a cerambycid, and that's another word for them, is longhorn beetle because of the length of the antenna.
So this is one of the, okay, so what do we do? Gretchen and I are trained to notice problems. And we're essentially, or I'm a stress manager of trees. So what I do is I come into your property and I try to identify the conditions that would exasperate a problem or create a problem. And what usually creates the problem are people. So what happens is we build a nice house, but when we come in, we're disturbing the natural site of the tree. And, you know, what happens is we plant grass, which is a competitive organism. If you go into a forest, you don't see a real thick, lush lawn. You'll see other plants and things, but they are not as competitive. So what we do is we put trees in a very competitive, stressful environment. Maybe they would not normally thrive in that situation, and we expect the best, and we don't always get the best. So things that we can do. I'm a big proponent of mulching trees. Mulching is going to most accurately mimic its native condition in the forest or where it grows. And in the very least, what it's going to do, it's going to prevent lawnmower blight, it's going to hold moisture, it's going to be a temperature buffer. And I was really not, you know, when I was in college, they talked about the benefits of mulching. But the company that I worked for in Cleveland, they would buy trees in the fall, and they would put wood chips over them over winter to insulate the root balls. And then in the spring, I was a lucky guy that went and put the straps on the ball to have the crane lift it up and put them on the trucks. What would happen just over winter? When the ball would come up out of the chips, you would not believe the fibrous root system that grew out into those chips over winter in one winter.
It insulated them.
It insulated them. If the temperature doesn't get below 40 degrees, the roots will continue to grow. So that is what really got me mulch-minded. What kind of mulch? I prefer, you know, the wood chip mulch. You can pick your color. I'm not a big fan of rock mulch.
No rubber, no rubber.
No rubber. The rubber mulch is expensive.
It's
It
hot.
washes away and it retains heat, even probably more than the stones.
Fry eggs on that baby.
So probably you're looking at organic type. And just quickly about mulch, don't use cocoa shells if you have dogs, because if they eat it, it can be toxic.
It smells just like chocolate.
Watering trees, Gretchen mentioned, 1 inch of rain per week. What does that mean, though, for you and me? Basically, you want to water your trees, and you're going to have to do it at least once, where you go through your watering cycle, whatever method you choose to water your trees, stop, and you're going to have to dig down about a foot, because that's where the feeder roots are, that are a little bit thicker than your hair, that take up the water. And if it's not wet in the top 12 inches, then you have to increase your watering cycle. So it takes a little bit of a investigation, but once you do it, you know, your soil type doesn't really change much over time unless you're
Adding soil.
Adding
Which you don't want to do.
so you know, you do the work to find out one time, and then you really know. Because, you know, I get that all the time, you know, the irrigation system waters the trees. Well, yes, it does in theory, but does it in actuality? You know, you don't know unless you really try. So, inspections. Inspections are important. You can inspect things. Take a good visual look at your landscape. Take a look, because, you know, I did this in my own house, you know. I'm coming home, and I'm walking by, and I've got barberry shrubs. And I walked by one time, and I just kind of, and I looked, and something didn't look right. And I looked, and I had barberry caterpillar all over it, and I barely had a leaf on it. So, you know, if you just take a look at things, if they don't look normal, chances are there's something going on. And it's always easier to take care of things in the early stages rather than the late stages. So if you can kind of take a snapshot of what things look like, and if you notice anything that's out of the ordinary, you can give Gretchen a call, you can give me a call. Okay, now if appropriate, you know, we talked about doing soil tests. Soil tests are a great way to discover what your you know, pH is, what the composition of your soil is.
What nutrients are needed.
Yeah, what nutrients are needed, what's there. Insect and disease management, sprays, injections, you know, insect and disease management, these are the things that we do that you necessarily don't want to do or can't do. But a lot of management you can do, and that is proper watering, proper cultural things. And then sadly, you know, if appropriate, if removals. is a viable management option. And, yeah,
On soil samples, how big of a sample would you need and where would you take it for testing?
Okay, you can buy, because that's gonna be Michigan State University, and that's gonna be our soils lab. You can order a soil test now on, no, it's not a kit, because this is all done by computer. In other words, the testing is very sophisticated. So the kits, if you buy a kit, sorry, they're junk. Because even if you're a lab tech, you get bizarre results. So what you'd rather do is spend the $25, buy a soil test self-mailer. You can do that online. And they mail you the envelope, it's got all the directions with it. It's got another envelope inside, it's got a plastic bag, you fill out the information, and you've already bought the test. And so then it's got the postage on it, yes. And so all you do then is load up the soil they talk about, telling you how to take it out, put it in the envelope, mail it away. In about 2 weeks, you'll be contacted by email and say your soil test is ready, go to this site, and then they give you a code. And so when you get there, there's a place for your code, which is 7 letters and numbers. You put it in, and your test opens. It's new, we just started this. The problem is the people that wrote it made it really complicated. Way too complicated. So what you do is, call me. I can open that same test at my desk with that number that you're looking at, and we can go over it and I can explain it. And that's what I do. That's what your tax dollars are paying for me to do, or your tax penny. I think probably by the time we divide it up, I don't do a lot of money. But anyway, so it's a way of you doing it. Where you want to go, and it's easy enough I can even remember the website. It's www.msusoiltest, all one word, .com. I mean, I can even remember that one.
yep.
I gotta stand up. The reason I'm here tonight is one main reason. Our backyard, after you go beyond the lawn, is all trees and green. You can't even walk through it. And I've got, like many people here, at least 8 or 10 big pines. I mean big. They're up 50, 60 feet.
Sure.
This is the first year I'm alarmed because I'm seeing dead spots in these pines. And you say fertilize and mulch. There's no way you could do it. I could do
Oh,
it.
sure. No, you can't do them all. I mean,
What is this disease? Is this a new disease? We've been there 14 years, and I've never seen all this brown on all these trees.
okay. Over time, what happens, and it can be from various things. That's the problem. It's not just one thing. There's a complex of things. We've kind of talked about various diseases that could pop up that are common. There are also some uncommon things. There are insect. I mean, we could be here till the cows coming home, talking about various insects and diseases which cause damage on pines alone.
But is there something new this year that hasn't been there?
Drought.
Drought?
This is the hottest, driest year ever for Michigan, at least the hottest. And it's gonna be a drought year, which means you have to do a certain category stuff. This is really tough on trees. So there's nothing new under the sun. Ramses II said that, and he was an Egyptian ruler. So the thing is, not that much has changed. It's just that we have weather right now that's exacerbating any problem that you have.
But there's no way I could water those trees.
Well, everybody's got to make their own choices.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no way. I mean, we're going to tell you how you could take care of them, but we're not saying we're sending the plant police and we're going to make you do it. So it's, you know, if you're able to do it, that's okay. So a lot of times people select trees because of emotional attachment to a certain tree. Grandma gave it to me, or it's in front of the house, or something like that. And maybe you're going to concentrate on that. I got 10.5 acres. You got a lot of property. So what it ends up being is you care for a certain number of them, and sorry guys, the rest of you are on your own. And that's all you can do.
The dentist always says, you know, you only floss the teeth you want to keep. So I like that saying. You can't take care of them all. There are forest management practices that cover wide ranges of acreage, and then there are arboricultural practices which go down to the individual tree. Now, you can't do prescribed burns, and and you can't do all these different things which increase soil fertility and decrease competition and do